I'd like to welcome our viewers and listeners to the Mi Camino series. Our guests today are a married couple, Blanca Meléndrez and Mark Patterson, who actually were brought together through a Spanish literature class here at UC San Diego. We'll get to that part of their journey a bit later, but for now, welcome Mark and Blanca. How about if you share with our listeners why you chose UC San Diego and what was your major and what attracted you to your major?
Thank you, Frank, for the invitation. My major was political science and Spanish literature. And I chose UC San Diego because that was a dream that my family and I had when we immigrated here to the U.S. And you?
I chose UC San Diego because I pretty much grew up on the campus. My mom was a immigrant as well, and she was one of the first Latinas to go to UCSD and attend Revelle College. She started in 1966 and then had a career there that spanned over 30 years. And so I went to the campus often, and I saw it as a place of learning, of excellence, and a dream as well to one day attend our beautiful campus.
And do you all remember your first quarter or your first year at UC San Diego? What was that like?
Yeah, Frank. So for me, my first quarter was very challenging. I transferred from a community college after 3 attempts to apply to UCSD and finally being admitted through the TAC program and affirmative action. So when I attended UCSD, my first quarter, I didn't really speak English well. So it was quite challenging. I felt very different and was trying to find ways to connect with the community on campus and connect with other Latinos as well. So the first semester or the first quarter was challenging, but I took my first political science class and I passed. And that just really gave me a lot of hope and helped me believe in myself. And from that point moving forward, I was able to graduate.
And I'm also a transfer student. I was at Southwestern College before attending UCSD. And I remember very much my first year on campus because I began taking Spanish literature classes. And it was amazing to be at such a prestigious university and at the same time take a course that is so close to home. It was one of the wonderful experiences being able to come home with my parents and speak Spanish and tell them about what I'm learning, to debate about the literature topics. We would read my essays and review and discuss. And it was just an amazing experience that here I was on my dream campus, and I was able to engage with my family about Spanish literature. That was really special.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. Let's talk a little bit about your parents. I too am a first generation student, and I feel very often our parents play a significant role in our decision to go to college. So maybe each of you could share a little bit about what role your parents played in your college-going decision-making, and if you remember any consejos or dichos that they might have shared with you that inspired you.
Yes, I think I can go. I was born and raised in central Mexico in a rural town. A lot of the community from Mexico, from that town, immigrates and works as farmers here in the U.S. So my dad always wanted to go to school and he never had the opportunity. So when we were born, my brother and I, he said, we want a different life for you, for your brother. So from now on, you're going to dedicate yourself to studying. And my family and I joke because, I don't cook. And I always blame it on my dad because he wouldn't let me get into the kitchen because my purpose in life was to have a career and a better future for myself and my future generations. So I am very grateful to my parents that without an education, they had a dream for a better life. And that meant, having a career, having a degree, and immigrating from central Mexico to northern Mexico and then to San Diego. and being able to go to college and to have a degree. And I remember, my dad would stay up at night every single night with me so that I could feel that support, because that was the only way he could support me. He wasn't able to help me with the academics, with the writing, with the reading, with understanding English, but he was able to sit with me in the kitchen or in the living room and stay up all night while he was reading and I was doing my homework, to have that support so that I could feel that I could do this and I could graduate, and everything was going to work out for us.
Wow, that's great. Mark?
And so for me, my mom having been a college graduate, a UCSD graduate, it was expected that after finishing high school that I would attend college, any college. And my stepdad, also a college graduate from La UNAM in Mexico City, also had that expectation of me going on to college. Even though he was not familiar with the process, it was clear when I would get my grades, and if I didn't make grades, it was known to me that I was not meeting expectations and I needed to step it up. And either I was going to work or go to college, but I was not going to be a flojo and live at home and do nothing. I mean, if I didn't want to go to college, you're going to work full time and you're going to pay your way. But if you go to college, we'll figure out a way to help you out. And so that was important, right? To have that support, to have that experience, even though my stepdad was not familiar with the system. Just having that desire and that support was very meaningful for me.
Excellent. And I'm curious, we know that from research that what often leads to success for students is they find community, they find their niche within the university. Blanca talked a little bit about having, a challenge that first quarter. I'm wondering if either of you found your niche or community, and if you did, what was that?
Yeah, for me, it was trying to identify my community and learning that there were people, Latinos like myself, at UCSD. So I took a Spanish literature class, and that's when I connected. And I found community in the literature department through my professors and through my classmates and friends. And that network was what really opened the doors for me, because that's how I learned about all these different resources within UCSD. I also was a student worker at the Center for U.S. Mexican Studies, and everybody, the director, the staff, the plateros, they all really supported me emotionally and also with academics. They guided me, they helped edit my reports, and they were always cheering for me because they knew, English was not my first language. And they knew that I was a transfer student and that I needed a lot of support and resources. So Center for U.S. Mexican Studies and the Literature Department are my allies and my supporters throughout my college.
And I definitely found community when I found my wife, right? And those Spanish, but it was those Spanish literature classes. I felt amazing. Just thinking about reminiscing and being that back there in the classrooms and having those conversations about Marxism and literature and en español, todo en español, was amazing. I felt like this is for me. It's hard to explain how amazing I felt being at UCSD, engaging in Spanish, critical theory, critical literary theory, totalmente en español, challenging myself, because at home, we spoke Spanish at home. But being bilingual is not the same as being biliterate. And it's not the same as being able to engage in an intellectual conversation at the university level in Espanol. It was amazing. And Blanca and I would have debates, and, I would critique her presentations, and she actually hated that, right? Yes. but I did it with love. I did it with love because, I was so, obviously my wife is gorgeous and I just love seeing her, but having that other level of connection, that here we were two aspiring academics, right? passionate about what we were doing and falling in love. That was amazing.
So you met in literature, Spanish
Yes.
literature. And do you remember that first day, Mark, that you saw her? Like, tell us a little bit about that story.
Yeah. Yes. So it was, it was the first literature class that we really started to see each other was a small upper division seminar-like class. And it was about Raymond Williams, who's this Marxist writer about literary theory. And we were studying contrahegemonia, counter-hegemony, these really high-level concepts. And it was a small setting, right? There was just this large conference table, and there were maybe 15 students tops. And so that was where I could like see Blanca across the way, and she could see me. And I remember one time after class, because we would go to that class and then we would go to with Max. There was Jorge Mariscal. I gotta give a shout out to Jorge Mariscal if he's still a professor at UCSD. I think he is. He was the professor at the time. And then we would go to another class with Max Parra, and so in that wait, we're waiting for the next class, and Blanca comes up and says, hey, so it sounds like you kind of understand this contrahegemonia concept. Help me understand what's the deal? And we started talking about it, and I suggested, you know what? Why don't you give me your phone number and we can then have a follow-up conversation instead of just waiting in the hallway for our next class. And that was it. She was willing to give me her phone number. It was a great move on my part. And she was willing to meet with me, which was I found amazing. And that's how our relationship really began, talking about contrahegemonía y marxismo en literatura. And I think, for those students that are considering, obviously relationships are an important part of being being a college student. Having someone that you can engage with in a common interest is so critical, because we just helped each other navigate the next couple of years. We also both pursued master's degrees at UC San Diego, and we ended up being TAs in the Spanish literature department. I did linguistics, and so yeah, I think I answered your question, Frank.
I always love hearing that story.
Yeah.
Thank you, Frank. And I was just going to add that, my high school friends and my college friends knew Mark, and I never met him. I never met him until maybe 6-7 years later on campus. So that's a funny story too.
Yeah. Some might say it was destiny.
It was destiny, yes.
And we'll be married 20 years in November this year, Frank.
Wow. Congratulations. Most students live on campus, but you two are commuter students. Do you mind sharing a little bit about that experience?
Yeah, so I actually lived in Tijuana, and I would get up at 3-4 in the morning and then cross the border, drive all the way to La Jolla, and come back around 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night. I did that for many, many years, 3 years of undergraduate and almost 3 years of master's, and until I married Mark, and then I started living here on this side in San Diego. So that was my journey.
Yeah, and I also, there was a time when I lived in Tijuana when my mom commuted to UC San Diego on a daily basis. At some point we ended up moving to Chula Vista, which is pretty close to the border. It's only 5 minutes away. And my mom would commute on a regular basis. And so when it was my turn to go to college, there were occasions where we would drive together. And that was amazing. That was very special to have the opportunity to commute with my mom. That 40-minute drive and that long drive home from La Jolla to Chula Vista, the traffic is no joke. But, having some time with my mom was also very special and unique from my experience.
That's great. Hey, you both got your bachelor's and your master's degree. And what are you each doing now professionally in your careers?
So I love my job. I work for UC San Diego. I am the executive director of the Center for Community Health, which is a very unique unit of the university because we advocate for social justice in communities of color when it comes around issues related to hunger and chronic disease prevention. So I'm the executive director. I've been at the center for 20 years, and I love my job. It's about providing opportunities for communities of color to live healthier lives. So we opened the first farmers market that accepted food stamps in City Heights, to most recently operating a dollar for dollar match on the purchase of fruits and vegetables throughout Southern California to increase food security among our food stamp participants. So that's what I do, working with refugees and immigrants and making sure that they have the means to eat healthy food and to have access to healthcare and to just live healthier lives, and advocating for equity, racial equity.
And I'm currently an assistant principal at Montgomery High School in the Sweetwater District. After I graduated from UCSD, I decided that I was going to be a teacher, a bilingual teacher. And I pursued my BCLAD credential so that I could teach español, clases de ciencias sociales en español, social science classes in Spanish. And I started my career teaching at Castle Park High School, which was actually the high school that my mom graduated from, my brother graduated from. And it was a wonderful experience. And after the years, I decided that I wanted to get into administration, and I pursued my admin credential. And for the last 6 years, I've been an assistant principal.
And I just have one more question for each of you. What advice do you have for our young scholars who are listening to this recording?
Yeah, thank you, Frank, for that question. The advice is probably based on my lived experience. I think what really changed my journey was asking for help. Many times when we feel alone, we don't feel comfortable asking for help. And I think that's one of the things that really helped me. Reaching out to friends, to staff, to professors, and just asking for support and asking for help. And of course, you have a dream, and all we need is that opportunity. And once we're given that opportunity, we work very hard, So Latinos work hard, we're dedicated, and, sí se puede. Definitivamente sí se puede. So just being very proud of your heritage, of your culture, be respectful of other cultures and communities, and ask for help so that you can be successful academically.
And my advice would be to follow your passion. When I went to UCSD, I had to decide what was I going to study. I had completed all my general ed classes, and I went back to the most fulfilling experience that I had in high school, which was in my AP Spanish Lit class. Although I wasn't successful academically, I loved the class. And I went back to that. And my life today is a continuation of that passion of biliteracy, of giving back to the community. So don't worry so much about the job that you're going to have after college. Right now, worry about focusing on what makes you happy. Think about the experiences that you had in your childhood or in high school or right now, and what about those relate to a college experience. And in my case, it was Spanish, estudiar español. And I'm sure that there are, a lot of students that have really wonderful and memorable experiences in STEM topics. Maybe they had a great experience in a robotics club, or whatever the case may be. Search deep and remember what made you happy and pursue that when you're in college.
Blanca, Mark, thank you for sharing your journey and advice with our young scholars today. I'm really happy that you could join us.
Thank you so much, Frank. I really enjoyed this experience. This is the first time that Blanca and I have been interviewed like this.
Yes, thank you so much for the opportunity.
And it's an opportunity for us to give back. And hopefully, somebody will watch this video and have a positive outcome as a result.
Yes. And I just want to say, UC San Diego for both of us changed our lives.
Yeah.
So thank you for that.